afternoon, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about. And we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things tonight. My guest, Roberto Lovato, who's been on the show a number of times in the past, and I drag him back because he's so interesting and my guests like you. Thanks for coming on
All
again.
right, thank you.
How are you feeling right now?
I suppose a little overwhelmed, but just trying to keep their spirits up and, just doing as much as possible, being on the streets, talking to people, being an activist, and part of an activist team with Joe Walsh, and being on, like I said, on the streets and being involved in civic duty and civic action. So that's how we keep going.
You bet.
Right.
Joe Walsh was just on the previous show.
Yeah.
He's a delight.
Yeah.
You two are a heck of a team.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see us out on the bridge on Friday on Hawthorne Bridge. So
Hawthorne Bridge here in Portland, Oregon.
Before we go too far, I want to thank you, Dr. Don, for having this program and enlightening the Portland, Oregon area and the surrounding area, because this is a very good program to get news and information, important information out to the public.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. It's been a while since you've been on, so let's go through the bio stuff again about who you are personally a little bit before we get into specific things that we'll talk about. And I had touched base with you about things we might possibly talk about. I can't find my cheat sheet. You've got it over here.
We had it somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was born in Santa Barbara, California on October 13th, 1946. I'm first generation Mexican American. My parents were from Mexico. So I may not look like a Mexican American, but I am. So, that's handy at times. And, I graduated from school system in Santa Barbara, California, Santa Barbara City College, UCSB, University of California at Santa Barbara, and with a BA, and an MFA in art from the University of Colorado at Boulder in 1973. So I sort of have lived the triangle. I've lived in Berkeley, Santa Barbara, and Boulder, Colorado. So that's sort of a activist intellectual triangle, which I was really amazed at that I got through that. But anyway, I did a lot of activist stuff during the Vietnam War in the Santa Barbara area. I worked on the campaign to stop Diablo Canyon up in San Luis Obispo.
A nuclear facility?
Yes.
Diablo Canyon,
yeah, it's one of the. That was according to David Brower, who I met and talked to before, said that was his greatest, worst error that he ever made, and he wished he could take it back, was allowing them the permission to site Diablo Canyon on a fault line.
Mm-hmm. And tell me who David Brower is again.
He was the head of the Friends of the Earth and a well-known super activist. I mean, he carried the environmental movement during the 60s, 70s, 80s, and very important person.
I remember now, yeah.
Yeah, he was quite a person. He would come to these things and say, oh, in my little hand, this little bit of teaspoon of soil has 80,000 or million organisms and stuff, and this is a precious little entity here. And so, just involved with this kinds of stuff, the environmental movement. I've worked with the Green Party in California, the Peace and Freedom Party in California. I worked with the United Farm Workers Movement in the Santa Barbara area, organizing and doing stuff with them. And in 1980, I supported the Citizens Party, which was a national U.S. party which had like 38 states where they were on the ballot, and they ran Barry Commoner
Commoner
for president and LaDonna Harris for vice president.
Uh-huh.
And I attended their convention, and that was the first year that the actual German Greens came to the United States to visit our convention and carry on a dialogue with environmental groups in the United States, because being born in Santa Barbara, I can't remember what year it was, but I think it was like 1965. That was the first major oil well blowout in the United States. It was off the coast of Carpinteria in Santa Barbara.
Yes.
And I remember all the birds and stuff being covered with oil and putting straw on the beach that suck up the oil. And that was the home of the United States Environment Movement. That's where things started to activate. There was also a forming of this group called the Community Environmental Council, and that was started by a young man in the Vietnam times, because he was a conscientious objector, and the judge said, well, you have to do something, some social justice work or some kind of community work in your community. So he created this huge one-block environmental organic community garden in downtown Santa Barbara, which started percolating this movement for community gardens. And then later on they formalized it and then created something called the Community Environmental Council, which was one of the first groups to start with the solar technology using panels. They had a 2-acre site on a bluff overlooking Santa Barbara, and they had an organic garden there. They had a new construction building with a garden on the rooftop, solar panels. They worked with ARCO and stuff to generate new patents for the water solar heaters and the solar panels to work with the industry. So they actually had that way in advance. So I come from that background, and
what a memory!
I was I was involved in organic community garden. I was an apprentice there for a year and learned a lot of things. So that's carried on through my history. So everywhere I've gone, and my wife have moved. We've lived in several places. We always plant fruit trees, and I think that goes back to the story book of the man who planted trees, because that was his gift to the world, was to plant more trees. So that's a mission.
Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah. So I'm just involved in politics and alternative politics. So I ran for the 2nd District of the State Board of Equalization in California in 1986. I was endorsed by Dr. Benjamin Spock.
Wow.
And the night of the election, I went to sleep, and the LA Times was reporting that I had 5,000 votes, and I raised my hand. I said, "Yay, 5,000 votes, great!" And so in the morning, I woke up and the LA Times was reporting that I had gotten 63,000 votes. But it was far short of the 400,000 needed to win. But I was impressed because people said, "Oh, I saw your name on the ballot," and people in LA and stuff like that. So I'd been making the rounds between communicating with the Greens in Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. So we're doing that a long time ago, and so I'm continuing that effort.
Will you run for political office again, you think?
I don't know. That's a serious thing to take thing. Right now, my major thoughts in my evolution are that we have a better chance of being heard on our local politics, because our what I've learned in my experience is things like the U.S. Congress, the constituents, they hardly pay attention to this. The corporations, as we know, and stuff. So. Working on the local level with Joe, we have worked on the Charter Commission, Review Commission to work on changing the Portland City Charter, and we showed up there as activists continue
You
to
guys are
push the issues.
tireless. You're tireless.
Oh, I can't say that. It takes a lot of energy, you know. But yeah, that's pretty much who I am. And I remember today I had something to say to you.
What?
All the issues going around about the police and the African American community. Well, I have to say to everybody that we need to change the language on a lot of things in our society at this moment, because if we continue to talk about the same thing and do this and don't change looking forward to progressive future, we really have to change the language and the values. And I don't know how we do that, but it's the questions come up to me. One of the things that my friend, Professor Gregory K. Freeland, who is professor of history and chairman of the political science department at Cal Lutheran, was that relating together, my friend is African American, and I've known him since high school. So we have known each other for almost 50 years. We're going to probably celebrate 50 years in Montego Bay. But anyway, I was talking to Greg, and Greg comes up here every once in a while. So, my mother was a very racist person.
Really?
Yeah, she was Mexican, and a lot of Mexican people don't like African Americans.
So
they have this inboard thing. So, coming out of that situation in my home, I retained some of those values because this was my mother.
Of course.
So it's reflecting what you're taught and how your house goes and things. And it's really strange because my mother we were poor. One person household with 3 sons to raise. So during the years I had a battle with my mother over my friendship with my friend Greg and other African American kids who I hung out with, because they were my best friends. And whenever she got upset at me and her racism would come out of me, she would say, well, if you like them so much, why don't you go live with them? And I was just like, I'm dealing with it.
Yes.
So then, living along with my friends and then growing with them, I had differences with them, but I also had racism of my own that I inherited from my family, and I had to deal with that. And that's one of these the hardest internal thing to say to yourself, because the superiority thing comes to the end. That's what Tim Wise talks about, white superiority. Yeah. Even though I'm Mexican American, I've got that blend in me, I also had tastes of superiority.
Yes.
And so I had
white
to
privilege.
Yes. Because then I had to reflect on that and search inside, and then see the truth of what was really coming down, lies, and learning about the gifts and contributions like jazz and writing of Langston Hughes and all these things that were, the slaves built the U.S. Capitol. It wasn't white people. They drew up the plans, but it was the slaves that built it. How many people acknowledge that? So I acknowledge that because I learned that in my going through history. So Greg has helped me a lot. We're really, we talk about all this stuff, and he, probably acknowledges my growth in that area because it was very things to deal with internally. I think we all have to do that.
How did you happen to become aware of that part of you, that kind of messages that you listened to when you were growing up, and it affected your awareness of a little degree or some degree of racism or thinking you're better than black people? How did you become aware of that? It requires some real good introspection.
Well, I wrote this paper one time, which was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I was taking an African American class in, I can't remember, at UCSB, and I wrote this horrible paper about
University of California, Santa Barbara?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I wrote this horrible paper, which was a diatribe against African American culture and making the statement that they had no culture. I made that.
Mm-hmm.
But then years later, after I realized what I said, I just like, oh my God, I'm sitting in San Francisco listening to Pharoah Sanders, Horace Silver, Hubert Laws, Yusef Lateef.
Yeah.
And that was totally, that was like total contribution to America. That's what part of America is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And realizing that and the writing of Lansing Hughes and people like that, and then reading that and the truth and value in those. So it's a real soul search. And I think that America needs that soul search.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to how to work with people to do that. I talked with the Reverend Lord from the Unitarian Church about Tim Wise, and we tried to get Tim Wise to come back, but he had already been here at PSU, and I wasn't aware of that. So Greg, my friend, professor at the chair at Cal Lutheran, turned me onto Tim Wise.
Mm-hmm.
So he keeps hearing these things. We dialogue about stuff and the whole jazz thing. So, there's just stuff that people, I see it all the time. And like I said, sometimes it's beneficial for me to people think that I'm just white and I'm sitting somewhere and I'm listening to these things and being, well, I don't know, people, you better search your soul, because we're apparently, the outcome that's happening now with Trayvon and all the shootings in Portland is just evident that if you're a person of color, you are profiled from the beginning, no matter what you do. You can, everybody creates problems, but just to be minus on the start to get-go, just because you're sitting in a car and you're sitting in a brand new Mercedes and then they pull you over and say, well, where'd you get this car? Because you're a black person sitting in a brand new Mercedes. You shouldn't have that.
So there's a lot of that going on in America today.
Oh, yes.
Why is that? Why is it going on today?
Because it's a superiority complex that Americans have, white Americans.
Tom Wise, W-Y-S-E.
Tim Wise.
Tim Wise, W-Y-S-E.
Yes.
And what's the title of his book?
Well, he has books and CDs, and he goes all around universities. He's well known to speak on this. But it's about white superiority. Is the main topic.
Google Tim Wise, W-I-S-E, because I've got, not his most recent book, but the one before that, on white privilege. I forget the name of it, but anyhow, it's a really must-read for anyone who's concerned about human decency and social responsibilities.
We're all on the Titanic together right now. And I think that we have to pay concern to the communities of color, because they get shoved aside like they don't exist. And Portland is really, is a towering power of the green movement in the international community. I think Portland, and I said this to Eileen Brady, just because you're talking about sustainability doesn't mean that you're being all inclusive, because I think the terminology of sustainability is a white elitist terminology. And what gets created are areas of specialty, say like the Pearl. Yeah, may look good, but nobody, who benefits from that?
Is that a yuppie part of Portland, the Pearl?
Yes, it is.
District? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, the urban development and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm getting into the story of Portland, but my civic duty is to be socially just and to reach for that.
Sure.
And Martin Luther King, whose day is today of his assassination, Joe told me it was like 40. Was it 40-some years?
I'm not remembering. I'm embarrassed, but it was about that.
Yeah, 1968.
But say who Eileen Brady is.
She's a candidate for mayor, and she says
in Portland.
Yes, in Portland. She says, "Oh, yes, I'm part of the new seasons." And the new seasons higher up say, "No, you weren't. You were just married to one of the people."
I remember now. Yeah.
And she's talking about sustainability, and I asked her the question. I said, "Well, if you do sustainability, are you going to be all inclusive? Because you ought to need to include people of color and the low income." Poverty people. Nobody's talking about the poverty people. They just get shoved aside. Not even Obama talks about the poverty. He's saving the middle class. And I have a nit to pick with the middle class, because as long as the middle class expects what they're going to get and they're given what they get, they don't do anything. They just consume. And we can't consume and consume because there won't be anything left.
Now, you had a metaphor a couple minutes ago. We're all on the Titanic together. Powerful, interesting metaphor. What did you mean by that? We're all on the Titanic together. And I'm thinking about what happened to the Titanic. Will you say some more about that? Why you use that
Oh,
phrase?
I just said, sinking ship. We hit an iceberg, and man, we all got to work on this to keep get off the boat alive and not go down with it. So
Who's the we all you're talking about?
Everybody, citizens of the United States of all colors and all whatever, we have to work together. And
The
right now,
Titanic sank, so you think that America is sinking.
yes, America's sinking.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. What's your evidence?
My evidence?
Yeah.
Well, we're not the all-powerful country in the world anymore. We like to think we are.
Well,
We just put up Navy, military stuff. That's why we have sort of power. But there's different dialogues on different parts of the world talking about us. And as Chalmers Johnson said, the famous terminology that the CIA uses is blowback. When you go and occupy somebody's country, the people there don't necessarily like you being there. And we don't learn from history because we keep trying to do it again. And mainly I'm talking about Iraq and Afghanistan.
why do we keep trying to do it again, over and over
Because
again?
the corporations own
Oh,
the U.S. Congress, and they own the U.S. military, because the U.S. military provides the muscle to get the resources that U.S. global corporations get the resources from other countries. So we're in a battle for oil with China. And so how do we get the oil? We go and we put up our forces and take over other people's countries so that we can get hold of the oil.
that's a generalization about corporations. Is there anything good about corporations that you can say?
Well, there's this thing called a B corporation, which is an incorporation in, I don't know if it's like 7 or 8 states that actually have this. I was just talking to Dan Meek about it. And before corporations were all the Supreme Court, so-called Supreme Court decisions that gave corporations personhood. A corporation, in order to be chartered by a state, had to have some benefit for the people.
Yes.
And they said, no, we don't want to benefit the people. We want it for us, the corporation. So then, the judges and all never decided that. Actually, there was a clerk who said, oh, well, this goes right along with, I'll just put this in the paperwork and it'll happen. And then
In the margin.
created precedence.
So as time has gone by, corporations have gotten more and more powerful. Nothing like what the intention was when corporations were first created, the idea of corporations.
So now, I haven't researched this, but I came up across this thing called B Lab, which is a certifying organization which certifies B corporations. And it says that a certain percentage of the corporation has to do work for social good or the community. I just talked to Dan about it. He said there's a category like that in Oregon. It's not exactly the same, but some states have that. So if you charter as a B corporation, then you have to present part of your corporation as a benefit to the public and do something.
More than just profit, huh?
Right. So I think that's one. If the corporate models remain, and it probably will because it's so powerful. They own the government, they own the courts, they own the military, they own the police.
So what do we need to do about that? We meaning the 99%, Roberto.
That's on the Titanic? Yeah, the 99%. Well, we have to keep going out there. And like I said, I think at this point, the most effective thing that we can do is work on our local politicians, and make our voices heard and make them responsible. Because, I don't know if I should run down my perspective on what's happening in America. The reason that the schools are closing, Jobs are getting in the public sector are disappearing. Healthcare is in a bad situation. It's all about the corporation and the corporation profits. Everything is being privatized. They want to close the U.S. Postal Service, get rid of the U.S. Postal Union, which is the largest in the United States, and they want to take it over and privatize the mail system.
Why would they want to do that?
Because FedEx and UPS could take it over and then they can make profits.
Profits? Well, what's wrong with profits? What do you got against profits?
Profits are good, but, you know, if you're just paying back the profit to your CEO, you're working your workforce as the lowest marginal slave labor, and then you're paying a large dividend to the shareholders who are just gambling.
Yeah.
And that's how that system works. So there are some benefits, and they create some stuff that we need, but it's at a very high cost, like gas. I mean, it's subsidized so much. You know, it's corporate welfare, and they keep barking back because they say, no, we're not taking any handouts. We're just getting subsidies.
What do you think about ending corporate personhood, taking away corporate power and going back to what corporations were intended to be many years ago? What do you think about having that happen?
Well, I think it's going to be a hard process, a long process, if we ever do. Because
wasn't it a hard process when we went for civil rights, or women's right to vote, and ending the war in Vietnam?
Yeah, but at least then we had some semblance of a working court system, some semblance of a government, and patterns of justices, you know, like in the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall, Earl Warren, people like that. We don't have that anymore. They're all representatives of the corporations. You know, we should make them wear the logos on their gowns.
Okay. So I hear you saying what's wrong. I'm not hearing you say what's right or what we need to do.
What we need to do is to continue to make our voices heard, keep talking to people about the issues, and show how it affects their lives. I mean, people don't realize when they go to shop at Walmart that creates a whole new thing. I mean, it sends jobs to China. They're buying products that the corporations, Walmart tells all its suppliers, look, you won't supply us unless you lower your prices. And how do you do that? You go to China to get your stuff made. U.S. jobs go out the window. You get lower prices. People shop there because they're low prices. It's people who are lower income. They don't understand what it means to buy.
All right. I hear you telling me different aspects of our society, what's going on in America that's wrong. Right. And I'm looking for what we need to do.
Well, we just have to educate them. I mean, like buying at Walmart. You know?
My director just yelled at me. We're going to take a break and then come back, okay? Let's take a break and put a couple panels up while we take a breather. Oh, hello, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. For you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And we've decided to talk about a whole bunch of stuff that's going on in our country and in the world today with my interesting and endearing guest, Roberto Lovato, who's been on a number of times in the past. And I'm not sure about you in the first half of the show, but I've been enjoying what we've been doing, talking about. But I had a cheat sheet, and I'm going to mention these things that we could possibly talk about. And just so they're in our minds,
right?
And then we'll start talking about race because you wanted to talk about that.
Well, we covered that a little bit, but yeah, if we want to go into that deeper, that's.
And the U.S. president's performance to date, the Arab Spring, Occupy movement, Trayvon's murder, the Afghan slaughter, and move to a man.
Boy.
What do you want to go to next?
Well, first, let me finish up with what you were saying. How do we deal with the solutions of corporations?
Yeah.
Well, we need to create a new language, and since today is the anniversary of not Malcolm X, but MLK, Martin Luther King's assassination, he was talking about a socially just society, and I think we have to carry that on, and bring that into our language. We need humane conditions for everybody. We need to empower individuals and community. We need member-owned co-ops and credit unions. We need worker-owned businesses. These all work. We need benefit corporations or B corporations. We need language that reflects the truth, not a whole bunch of lies. A lot of people talk about revolution, but I, as the generic part of the word revolution, the beginning of it is revolve. I think revolutions, that song, new boss, same as the old boss. You just do a revolution, and pretty soon you're facing the same thing over again. And that's historically, the proof is in the pudding. It's just evident to us. It's evident to me. I like to talk about evolution, which is something that Native American activist and poet John Trudell brought up. He said, we don't need to talk about revolution. I mean, you're going around and around. We need to talk about evolution. And a lot of people in the progressive community say, no, not evolution, because then the Christians take that wrong. Well, I don't care. We need to evolve, and we need an evolving language and an evolving community because we need to change what's happening now. So that's one of my points in solving what we do. We have to change the language. We have to do different things, create new things. We need to evolve. We're not a revolution. We're an evolution.
We're evolving. That's pretty broad consideration.
That's room for everybody.
How do we evolve? We being at least Americans in our society, in our culture, how do we evolve?
Well, we need to kind of lose the individual. Because for us to change and evolve, we got to be community oriented. We got to care for the person next door just as much.
What about the old American idea of individualism and conquering the West and all that kind of stuff to show that America is strong and this is how America prospered and got to be as big as it is because of individual initiative? What about that? That by the wayside?
Well, a little side panel to that. Remember, I was thinking this the other night. No disrespect to this American hero, but Woody Guthrie wrote this song, "This land is your land, this land is my land," all the way from California to the New York Islands or whatever. That is not true. America stole this land, and it doesn't belong to the Americans. It belongs to the native people who were here first. It was already occupied. So I'm bucking history in these things, and Mr. Guthrie is an important historical figure, but I listened to some. He wrote some songs for the Cooley Dam, which was the biggest construction in the dam to stop the water and the flow of fish, and buried all the native villages underwater because he got money to write these songs.
Yes. I saw the show on PBS.
I can't, anyway, brings into question his authority and that he was a good person who cared for the people, but this this land is not mine, it's not yours, it belongs to the native people. They were here first.
Whose land is it now?
It's certainly it belongs to the corporations.
It belongs to the corporation,
Yeah.
essentially. Well, now if I
get back to that question.
If I own this plot, this home, and the land, my home is on a piece of land, and there's a mortgage, and I'm paying the mortgage. So who owns the bank? A corporation. So actually, is this a sophisticated way of economic serfdom, or
yes.
so
it is a ruse.
We're all subordinate to the ruling elite, the super rich, the 0.001% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't really our land. We're taught that it's our land, but it isn't. And as long as we're paying and we have to work in order to pay these people who are making money and making profits, gross profits, then they actually own.
Well, the whole thing started with the Pilgrims. Because when they came over here and they invaded this land, they created, or they had the concept of ownership. Then they wrote these laws to parcel off the land and tell the native people they could only own so much. But the native people didn't own this stuff. They just used it. They understood the land. They could never own the land. They could never sell the land because they had to cross from, in the winter they had to live in the south, in the summer they had to live in the north, so they went from place to place. They were nomadic. Now we have barbed wire fences, popularized properties where people think they're going to own, but we all die, and it's not going with us. But we have to kind of like understand we're just using the land, and if you think that I'm wrong, don't pay your property taxes and then see what happens.
Okay, you're talking about a situation, but then what do we, the ordinary citizens, need to do about the corporations owning the land?
Well, we just have to, like I said, make noise, go to our local politicians, try to muscle on them. I mean, you have to remember all the things that are happening to us on the local level are the reason they're happening to us is because the banks and the Wall Street bankers stole, and with the amount of money being spent on the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan and further operations that we don't even know about, $30 trillion were taken out of this economy. It disappeared in the last 4 or 5 years. Now, how do you recover that? Plus, we had to pay trillions to make the corporations, the banksters, and Wall Street whole. So you say $50 trillion is gone. Where should that money end up? That should end up in education, healthcare. If we had that money back, that would solve a lot of our situations because we could afford healthcare. I mean, this is the wealthiest nation in the world, and where is it's located in the 1%. And we need to continue that message, and Occupy is doing that because they're saying, well, we need to look at this. We need to continue the dialogue. We have to, like I said, create a new language and the new ways of thinking about what's been happening, because if we continue to stay in the same rut, we won't get anywhere. I mean, we were in the Vietnam War, we were like home free because Nixon was gone and all that stuff. We were doing good, right? So then we fell asleep for the rest of the time until now. And now we've woken up in a nightmare. So we continue, you continue to do these programs, have guests on, and do the work in your community, affect your local politicians, and when you see wrongdoing, you say, this is wrong, we need to do better, we can do better, take care of everybody. It's that humane treatment of others, and being acknowledged that we need to breathe good air, drink good water to survive.
You want to talk a little more about race? You said you weren't through, or you want to keep going into something else?
Well, I just think that, as Tim Weiss says, we all need to reflect because there's a lot of work to be done. And you all have to be committed to be able to say, because you have to acknowledge that you have a problem
And
and how you see other people. So, and you have to acknowledge that you have a superiority complex because you think you're better than somebody. You're not better than somebody else. You're a human being, and we're all human beings. And just because we have different pigments and you're from a different part of the world, it's,
So some people say that we humans need to be better than somebody else. So, and then we're encouraged by the ruling elite, the super rich, the corporations, and those who really control things to feel that we're incomplete, deficient, and the only way we can feel anywhere okay or worthwhile is to be better than somebody else. So we have to find somebody else, some group, some color, some culture to look down on, so that relatively speaking, at that time, I will feel like I'm important because at least I'm better than that black guy or that redneck. Or
well, it's all in history of America. I mean, the Chinese, I mean, God, they were treated worse than dogs.
We have to realize that this is a fantasy that has been given to us by the media and by the ruling elite, who will control the information flow to us, and move beyond that and recognize the objective fact that one human being is inherently as good as the next human being, genetically and just by the nature of being alive, being a human being. And it's our performance and our behavior toward fellow human beings and other living things that determines whether or not somebody outside of us can look at us and say, well, Roberto is a good human being, a good man. I have my closing comments, which always go for KFC, kind, friendly, and charitable, which is another way of saying living lovingly, and that is my goal in life, to live lovingly, to be kind, friendly, and charitable, and to be aware of something you mentioned earlier on, those kinds of things that I learned in my childhood growing up about racism and being better than somebody else. And that it wasn't overt in my family, but I could hear comments and conversations going on. And the Creoles in New Orleans, we were taught that we were better than colored people because, and the white man saw us all as niggers, but we had to have somebody to feel better than, so we were better than those colored people. And I'm aware of that tendency. And then sometimes I'll see a white person, and like in a public place, in a place of business, and they will start talking to me, and something about the way they're talking, their accent or whatever, or the way they look, and I'll harken back to when I was a little kid in the Deep South and experienced that kind of a white person, and then I gotta think for a moment, now I gotta be objective and be KFC, kind, friendly, and charitable to this human being, because I'm behaving toward him right now based on something I learned a long time ago. So I experienced the conditioning and learning, quotes learning, that told me that Jews were not as good as ordinary people. But we were better than Jews. We had to watch out for them. But it wasn't overt. And we were certainly better than colored people, we called them, or Negroes. So at least I have that awareness of those kinds of things that are working out of my awareness when I live my everyday moment-to-moment existence. So for you to be aware of that learning that you got somewhere when you were small, that you thought you were better than black people, at least you have that awareness and you can face it and calibrate yourself from time to time when you're dealing with a black person instead of being condescending or something like that. It's good to have that awareness. So many people don't have that awareness.
Well, there's something about hanging out with my friends. It was the simplicity and the honesty. And just hanging. And, I used to hang out with the guys at Santa Barbara City College, and we used to go to visit our friends after they graduated and went to San Jose State. And there, some of the people we met were Lee Evans and John Carlos, the African Americans who raised their hands in Mexico City in the Olympics.
Yay!
And it was just like, hey man, this is, it was a great time, and that's where I learned, because I don't know, it was just like home and hanging out. So
I noticed on the screen they talked about the Oregon Progressive Party. That was a panel that put up. You're a member of the Oregon Progressive Party?
Yes, I am.
You want to say a few words about that?
Well, the way I think right now is these two major parties want to exclude everybody. They have so much power, and the corporations are paying them off. They've got their hands out. So we got to have alternatives to speak out with truth and issues and how we move forward. And that's why I'm a member of the Progressive Party. And that's at this point in my life, 65 years old. I don't think there's anything else, because what's happening right now is totally bought and paid for. And democracy, man, as Gil Scott-Heron said, man, if you think it, if you don't think they got a missile to send to your house, they got one. And if you order it, they'll send it to you.
Oregon Progressive Party. Now, how about Justice Party USA?
I'm not familiar with that, but I know that we're looking at Rocky Anderson as possibly being on the Progressive Party ticket, which I think would probably be beneficial for us.
Yes.
So that's up.
I joined that party, and I've sent some money, and we've got to have a genuine third party that has a national recognition to start somewhere. And I hope that our organization decides to put Rocky Anderson not as president and say that we support him. So that's. I wanted to say something about the Justice Party.
We need
Justice Party USA.
Some freshness.
Yeah.
Because what we're getting is.
Let me touch on a few more things to see if we can cover something else. Obama's performance to date, the Arab Spring, the Occupy movement, the murder of Trayvon, and the Afghan slaughter, and move to man. Which one of those you want to talk about for a few minutes?
Boy, he's got a lot of stuff here. Well,
what about
maybe.
Oh, go ahead.
The president. Now, I actually shook his hand at Lou's Dairy Freeze the day he came into Portland to speak before 75,000 at the waterfront.
Really? Did you wash your hand?
I'm saying if I meet the president again, I'll say I want my handshake back, Mr. President.
Why would you do that?
Because he's a nice guy, but he's also got a lot of secrets behind his, somewhere, and who knows what he's up to. I mean, they're always. I mean, he said, we're going to have change now. What kind of change do we have? More corporatism, more war, more military adventures throughout the world in a different way.
Why is he doing that?
I don't think when you're president you have that much power, because I think the military tells you what to do.
Oh, doesn't the Constitution say the president has all that power, the chief executive?
Well, you remember John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
When he starts saying the adventures in the world, the military adventures, and we need peace, and what happened to him? So I call it the government mafia. I mean, because
who do you think killed JFK?
I think the CIA or the Pentagon. They need to get him out of the way because he was putting a roadblock in their plans.
Was Lee Harvey Oswald involved in the killing, or was he a patsy, or was he one of a bunch of shooters?
He fits a profile for a
CIA
operative.
What's your opinion?
I think it was a CIA operative, and they buried all the truth and stuff. So they can't get. They can't. The government has a way of burying, getting rid of stuff, and either people disappear or get in an accident off the road, or documents are burned.
It's interesting.
So I don't know this controversy, but I know MLK, when he starts talking about Vietnam and the conditions and the social justice movement were all the same, what happened to him?
Do you think James O'Ray killed him?
There's a great way of making, what I call the government mafia seem like different things are happening, because they've got so many operatives all over the place. I mean, man, the operations that are going on now, we don't even know what's going down, but there's a new wave force of CIA operatives all over the world opening new fronts.
Do you
every
think
day.
James Earl Ray shot Martin Luther King? I know you don't know. Do you have an opinion? Maybe you don't.
Again, I have no idea, but I know and feel in my heart that the assassination was done by the CIA or government entity.
Mm-hmm. So,
because once you have Kennedys that can make a social movement, and he starts mounting, and it starts creating and digging into other things and tying everything together, then the powers be, which like I said, is the government mafia, starts getting worried about what they have to do, and they eliminate the people that are important.
There's been, I've heard it talk that Obama has behaved the way that he has in order to avoid being taken out, as Martin Luther King and Jack Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy were taken out.
Yes. I think that's plausible. And you see a president who people looked at as a hero, and then sort of, he did his language, and then when he got elected, he became something else. So, or either that, or they picked a perfect guy because his family had been involved with the CIA and they were grooming him.
Sure.
Because where did he come from? He came from
wealth.
He came from Chicago, a junior senator, and all of a sudden, bam. And it was like, wow, this is history, groundbreaking. It's an African American going for the presidency. So that was like, okay, yes, we're going to do that. But what was the inside story? It's like, whoa.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and somehow the discussion came up as to whether or not, you mentioned a moment ago about what our government is up to and what the true rulers of our country are up to. And I thought, are they preparing another Lee Harvey Oswald to take out Obama? And
it would not shock me
that they're
that
needing a scapegoat to frame as they take him out. And my friend said, oh no, he's too well protected. Well, the other leaders were well protected at the same time. And my own fantasy is that if Obama does not toe the line of the ruling elite, the super rich, they will take him out, as they took out JFK, as they took out Martin Luther King, and Paul Wellstone and other people. There are indeed accidents that happen where fine leaders die or are killed.
I believe when you go into the presidency, you're sworn to secrecy, will never divulge what happened. It's in your own interest so that you won't be brought along. That's why Obama went with all the stuff and wouldn't allow them to go after the torture stuff because it leads back. And yes, if he becomes a problem, he will have to leave.
All right. I just got a high sign saying that we better start winding down before they yell at me again. So let me say a few words here, and then I'll ask you for a final few words to our viewers. All right? Keep your pens and pencils handy because you may want to jot down something that we will show you in the closing credits, and thanks for watching. And a few public service announcements. Apparently, we want to tell you about the local broadcast schedule. To learn when my shows are going to be broadcast, go to my website, www.donbaham.com, and click on Present Day Activities. And the next panel we want to show you is how to get Dr. Don's shows on the web. Go to www.donbaham.com and click on Favorite Links, and you can see my shows on my website, www.donbaham.com, and click on Favorite Links. Next PSA I want to tell you about is the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. I've been unhappy with the ACLU. Again, they have come down on the wrong side, I think, of the Citizens United decision that gives corporations all sorts of incredible power and spend all the money they want. and learn about the ACLU. Bottom line, the American Civil Liberties Union has been the #1 protector of our civil liberties in this country. And overall, I still support the ACLU. I've been a member for 3,000 years, I think. So go to that website and learn some more about it. Now, to get Dr. Don shows broadcast by other stations in this country, you can ask your public access station to go to www.pegmedia.org to learn how they can get Dr. Don shows and broadcast them from their particular stations anywhere in the country. Now I want to tell you about corporate personhood. We got to eliminate corporate personhood because they're too powerful and they really run the country. To end corporate personhood now, go to www.movetoamend.org so we can amend the Constitution and get rid of corporate personhood so they can stop spending money and buying elections and owning the country. So it's time to say goodnight. I want to thank my wonderful crew. And oops, I've been told to thank you for watching and to ask you to remember KFC. Not that KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you. And to you too.
And to you.
And to you too. Thanks again for watching.
Keep up this information highway.
What do you got to say to my viewers out there? What do they need to do to make our country better?
Just pay attention, go and protest and do your opinions to your local politicians. Stay active. You can change stuff if you work at it. And just,
don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up the fight. Keep on going. We got a long way to go.
Thanks again and good night.